Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Capital District Regional Planning Commission's fourth webinar of our Climate Action webinar series, where we will be learning about how buildings in the capital region are being designed and retrofitted to reduce energy use, save on operating costs, and improve occupant comfort. We will also cover what programs exist for homeowners, not-for-profits, and municipalities to take advantage of to improve efficiency in their buildings. My name is Josh Dranoff. I am a senior sustainability planner on the CDRPC sustainability team. And I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and posted to our YouTube page and our website after. We will have time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So yes, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So first off, we have Paul Mendel, who is the owner of True Building Performance, based in Albany, New York. Paul is the owner of True Building Performance, an Albany-based weatherization contractor, and current vice president of the Building Performance Contractors Association of New York. Since becoming BPI certified in 2008, he had focused on practical building science solution, collaborating with utilities, weatherization assistance program agencies, and grant programs to deliver impactful energy efficiency projects while providing a real-world, field-based perspective on program implementation. And then we also have Christina Bohnsack, who is the co-director of the Capital Region Clean Energy Hub, which works with residents in the 8 counties of the Capital Region to lower their energy costs. She also volunteers for the town of Germantown as the Clean Energy Communities and Climate Smart Communities Task Force Coordinator. And so with that, I'd like to hand it off to Paul to get started. Thank you.
Hello. I think Christina is going to load up some slides here for us. All
Yep.
right. Um, so we're going to just start with kind of a very fundamentals to building science and energy efficiency and how that relates to houses. So what do you think in your home uses the most energy? I think most of us know that space heating, especially in the northern climates, right? We spend most of our money heating our homes, which is very different than in Florida, where you're spending most of your money air conditioning your home. With that said, days like today make you think otherwise. Air conditioners are working in overtime this week, and air conditioning can also be quite expensive um, with the rise of electrical costs. Next slide. Does anyone know what icicles are a sign of? Um, More often than not, it's heat loss, but believe it or not, ventilation has a lot to do with that. So having a well-insulated home and a well-ventilated attic usually can prevent icicles. Typically takes both of those to cause that problem, but when you have icicles, it's usually a pretty good sign that you're losing heat, and if you're losing heat, you're wasting money. Another simple building science thing is sweating pipes. Um, Often uninsulated pipes, they could be a different temperature than the current climate. So where this slide really kind of emphasizes on heat loss, condensation is an event that happens due to opposite temperatures. So if you have real cold pipes in your basement and it's really hot, uh, you're going to get condensation. And on the opposite side of that, if you have really hot pipes and your basement is cold and damp, you're going to get condensation. So it can actually happen all times of year when you have conflicting temperatures, which is why something as simple as insulating pipes can help with condensation. Building science as a whole, right? There's lots of components to a house, and they all kind of react together. You can't just insulate your attic and ignore condensation or moisture in your basement. It's really important to look at the whole house as a system, and how all the different components of your house, whether it be, connections to the basement or connections to outside, how we're burning combustibles or using electricity to heat and cool our house, and how the insulation and that moisture is trapped there. there's a lot of different components to a house, and you shouldn't just focus on one without really understanding the whole house and how those things all somewhat connect to each other. So, everything from vapor drive in your basement from having a wet crawl space could grossly affect the way your attic works. And if you're ignoring one and jumping to the other, you can really cause more damage than help to a home. Saving a little bit of energy with a well insulated attic, but trapping moisture because you didn't put the crawl space first, or deal with maybe carbon monoxide from connections to a garage, could cause much higher significant problems like carbon dioxide poisoning or substantial mold problems. So it's really important to look at the whole house as a system and not necessarily repairing one thing at a time. And that's a lot of what happens at energy audits is, we're starting with health and safety and working through the whole house. And that's why it's looking at the whole house and not just adding insulation in your attic. Um, when you start talking about building science, the first thing we kind of think about is the stack effect. And that's kind of what goes in must come out, right? So if you're leaking air from your attic, you're going to draw air in somewhere else, and seasonally that can change. But by paying attention to what's going out, you can reduce what's coming in. And it really needs to work in tandem. You want to make sure you're paying attention to both sides of that. But as we lose heat through the attic, it draws more cold air in. This is common when you have temperature imbalances and in parts of the house. Sometimes the second floor is hotter than the first floor, and maybe that's because you're drawing all the heat from your house up to the second floor and eventually out of the attic and pulling new cold air into the basement, which is then going to the first floor. And that whole thing kind of works as a system. So we often talk about the building envelope, what's inside, what's outside. And that system can change based on your house. You may have a basement, you may have a crawl space. Is that part of your boundary? Is your attic part of your boundary? Sometimes people will spray foam a roof deck, and that's now part of your building envelope, but maybe you should insulate your ceiling. And that could vary depending on where your mechanicals and equipment are, where the moisture barriers are. And that's really goes back to the whole house as a system and why building science is important. It's not just about adding more insulation, it's understanding, how to define those thermal boundaries. Where is our heat starting and stopping? So, understanding where your building envelope lies could change the way you design your mechanical equipment. It could change the way you design your air conditioning. Um, Understanding where moisture boundaries are. And, that's why pipes in a conditioned basement might never sweat, but pipes in an unconditioned may, kind of going back to an earlier slide. So, really understanding that, human behavior certainly has an impact. Maybe your basement isn't connected to your thermal boundary, but you're heating it anyway, or you're trying to heat it with electric space heaters. And maybe the thermal boundary shouldn't be at the ceiling, it should be at your foundation walls. And so really understanding, how that house is in use can, really change the way that you're looking at the thermal boundary. And by making sure your thermal boundary is correct or adequate, it can improve comfort. Obviously, it's going to improve air quality if you're making sure the parts that are outside are staying outside. The areas that may have higher amounts of carbon monoxide, like a garage, are clearly defined as separated. That's why often garages are not insulated, even in new construction. They're not considered part of the building envelope. And then by having a clear defined thermal boundary and knowing where your heat starts and stops, you can obviously account for that, design equipment for that size space, and ultimately reducing energy bills. Energy efficiency and how tight you have a home certainly can impact air quality. So, if you air sealed and insulated your attic and ignored a crawl space that might have high amounts of moisture, and now you're trapping that air into your house, it's certainly going to affect the air quality. Doing good building science and tightening a home and running things like blower door tests and understanding how leaky or not leaky a house is and if additional mechanical ventilation may be required. These all go into, you know, deciding or basically affecting the indoor air quality at some point because a home that's too tight without appropriate ventilation is going to trap a lot of things that are going to make that air quality worse. And a house that's too leaky is going to do the opposite. It's going to allow all that conditioned air out and exterior air in. So it's often thought that insulation is the bulk of the problem solver, but really air leakage is what drives the largest amount of heat loss or gain or transfer. So having a really well air sealed house is sometimes more important than a super well insulated building. Some insulations like spray foam and foam board are their own air barrier or can prevent or solve air leakage at one shot where other insulations or more conventional insulations like fiberglass and cellulose, air sealing needs to really be thought about before doing those products because they don't necessarily stop air leakage. So air leakage is always the first step. It's finally actually in code over the last several years, even to approve a new construction, they're required to do an air leakage test to make sure that it's only that the air leakage is minimal because air leakage will affect your utility bills substantially more than the amount of insulation that you have. Some simple steps for air sealing that you can do at home. You'd be amazed at how many people just don't lock their windows. Not locking windows can allow them to maybe crack open, which allows for massive air leakage. Interior caulking, some things as simple as just caulking around window installs, connections between, attic spaces, light fixtures, sometimes outlet gaskets and things like that might be simple answers. Weather stripping on doors are all very simple air sealing opportunities to help with air leakage. What are some of the things you think about when replacing your heating system? So, you know, operational costs are obviously a large concern. And depending on what type of equipment you have, switching equipment could very well change those operational costs. We're in a very confusing climate between directions and uh, plans of changes, and then the reality of the costs of those different fuel sources. So there can be a lot of confusion regarding that and understanding what might be the best for your building or your property. And then ultimately, insulation and your building envelope have the biggest impact. Knowing the correct load size, understanding that oversized or undersized equipment is going to affect performance and cost of operations. But you should always start with a well insulated building and then move to the type of system that you're going to have and understand what's available to you and how it may impact the cost associated with operating it. I'm going to give it back to Christina to tell you a little bit about the Energy Hub.
Hello, thank you all for being here. I'm Christina Bohnsack. I'm a co-director of the Capital Region Clean Energy Hub. And we are an organization founded by NYSERDA to educate residents about their energy options. We primarily work with low-income residential clients, but we also have resources available or can connect people to the correct resources for other types of programs. We also work in workforce development, but mostly we connect people with the right direction for increasing their energy efficiency and reducing their energy costs. We have a great team of 6 energy advisors covering the 8 counties that we do. They help people assess where to start because every resident's journey is a little bit different. They can also help people with filling out applications, navigating the program, We lead workshops and presentations on energy efficiency, heat pumps, solar, et cetera. Um, we table a lot with other service providers. We try to be connected with a lot of affordable housing type of organizations. And we stay up to date on these programs and the building science because it changes a lot. The building science doesn't change a lot. That's pretty established. But the programs meant to help people with these kinds of changes do have a lot of different things happening at different times, and it's hard to keep up for residents. So we keep up for them. We also will get a little bit into today the regional assessment and barriers analysis, and this is a large document that we did a study on the area and why these programs aren't as utilized as they could be. So what the main takeaways for our area is that people aren't really aware that this is important and how much it affects their bottom line as well as the climate. And they're also not aware of all the different programs that are available to them. There's also a decent amount of misinformation in this area where people will just kind of have the wrong idea about things. The programs are seen as cost prohibitive, have too much time to navigate. We have too few contractors serving several of our counties. And it's just not a huge priority all the time. The House needs other things first. There's also some mistrust and some complications. So we wrote a report to give to NYSERDA about these things and now are working on trying to develop solutions for the things that are within our control. One of the major things that every single of the RABA, so there's 12 hubs statewide, and every single one of them did a RABA. And I'm going to go over a few of the things that every hub saw as an issue. So some of that is that renters, tenants and landlords have kind of different priorities. You know, the landlord doesn't necessarily want to spend money on something that they won't have the payback for because the tenant is the person paying that bill. That's a major, major problem in this area. And I think something that the Clean Energy Communities program may be working on soon. Clean energy upgrades also take a backseat to health and safety issues like mold or asbestos. So we do try to find some funds to address both of those things. And we also just have really, really old housing stock in this region. So a lot of things must be addressed before we can work on the building envelope. So yeah, so even with the incentives that the NYSERDA programs and other programs provide, there's still usually not enough money to cover everything for every single person. So that's a major barrier. And again, something that we work to try to find other pots of money to help braid with that. And we would love to work with more municipalities that have possibly a home repair fund or things like that to just make sure we're all connected and that the client gets the most out of all of these public resources. It's at the time that you're getting your roof fixed is an excellent time to also be working with an insulation contractor. And by working together, the client not only gets their health and safety issue fixed with the roof leak, but they also can lower their operational costs, their bills monthly by increasing insulation at that time. So the major things that we see stopping insulation projects are roof leaks, asbestos insulation, and mold. We also have a fair bit of too much stuff in the area that needs to be insulated. So these are the kinds of things that NYSERDA will provide some funding for, but usually not enough to cover the full cost. So the Empower Plus program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, can be braided or combined with the Weatherization Assistance Program. Homes and Community Renewal has several grants that we try to work with, and then there are foundational grants, such as the National Grid Foundation can provide funds for some of these measures. I'm going to hand it back to Paul to talk a little bit about Empower Plus and the Comfort Home program.
So Empower is a low and moderate income program. So there are income qualifications based on the amount of occupants and county that you live in. It is eligible for 1 to 4 family housing, whether it's owner occupied or rented. Um, Once you apply and get approved for the Empower program, it's an energy assessor will come out, do, as we kind of mentioned, a full house analysis. We have to go through the whole house from basement to attic, collect lots of data, geotag, time-stamped photos, and collect all that data about the house and provide that information in a report back to NYSERDA. And it primarily is an insulation program. There are some ancillary benefits such as heat pumps or heat pump hot water heaters, sometimes some electrical improvements. But at its core, what it was originally designed to be was an air sealing insulation program. Um, there are 2 different tiers, as it mentioned, the low and middle. So this might be on the next slide, but there's 2 different levels of incentives. The first level being uh, effectively a free program as long as the project doesn't exceed the program caps. And the middle tier, which would be 50% of eligible measures to a program cap. Um, there's certainly some expectations with Empower, a reality to what can be done and can't be done, that can be difficult sometimes to convey to homeowners. There's an email that gets sent out and says you've been approved for $12,000, but that doesn't mean that NYSERDA cuts a check to you for $12,000 to do whatever it is you'd like. When we go through that audit process and we understand what the needs of that home are, assuming there's not health and safety roadblocks that exceed the program limits and budgets, we may have to focus on air sealing and insulating and putting appropriate vapor barrier in a crawl space before we can get to insulating your attic. So, NYSERDA really does a good job of understanding and educating building science and making sure that no harm is done, that all the work that we're doing will not just improve energy efficiency, but also protect the safety of the home and the occupants. There are houses that can just pose to be very difficult to retrofit. So, there are budgets. There is all preset pricing. So, for insulation in Empower, so it's not like contractors can really do whatever they want. We have to kind of follow a very strict set of rules and, program guidelines. We have to submit documents. Someone at NYSERDA reviews the project and approves it or denies it and goes from there. So, there's a lot of bad information out there that windows are the quickest and best way to save money in your house. And windows actually have the worst ROI or return on investment of most energy efficiency projects. So NYSERDA typically does not pay for windows in the Empower program. So expectation setting can be challenging with Empower because most homeowners aren't aware of what the real steps need to happen in a specific order and in a priority basis. Additionally, there's a lot of savings to investment ratio calculations. So if the project doesn't save more than it cost, they typically won't approve it. So you can't just do an electric panel upgrade without substantial insulation work that's going to provide savings to cover some of those electrical upgrades. NYSERDA also has changed the rules quite a bit about different incentives. So, several years ago, you could get an improved gas furnace, but we're no longer allowed to do gas incentives. They have the customers' best financial interest in mind. So sometimes, where the want might be to switch to a heat pump from natural gas, the cost effectiveness is not there right now. It would cost operationally more to operate heat pumps than natural gas equipment. So they're no longer allowing those switches. So, there really is a savings calculation behind all decisions with Empower improvements. Comfort Home would be the market rate program. Comfort Home actually is set to be expiring at the end of this year, and utilities will be making up the market rate incentives moving forward. But as of right now, we're using the Comfort Home program. Comfort Home works in a package-based program, so they really require that things are done in a very specific order to be eligible for those incentives. There's kind of three tiers to the Comfort Home. The first one being that the attic and rim joist is completed at the same time, or one or the other is already complete. That goes back to the building science and the stack effect. The goal is to really stop the infiltration and the exfiltration of air in addition to adding insulation. So, Comfort Home, no income requirements. If you insulate your attic and your basement, there's a $2,500 incentive. If you advance a little further to insulating your walls or any space that's above unconditioned, the incentive increases to $3,000. And there's additionally a window package that's also $3,000 if all those other measures have been completed.
Okay, so there is a new exciting affordable multifamily program upstate, AMP Up. This just launched in April, so we haven't worked with anyone who's gone all the way through it, but this is seemingly a very comprehensive project and actually has built-in additional support in the form of a concierge. We do have a hub staff member who's here today, and he can answer more questions in the chat about these specialty programs, Daniel Morrissey. So if you put anything in the chat and he wants to respond, that would be great. But basically, there's two pathways: low rise for 3 stories and fewer, and then large buildings for 4 stories plus. And these cover 85 or 70% of the project cost. And really, it seems like it's going to cover a whole lot and be very exciting. So a lot of larger buildings can start to be served and have those renters have less operational costs, lower bills per month.
I'm gonna jump in on you on that one, Christina. So one of the interesting things about the amped up pathway is historically on this segment of the market, and I'm not a commercial guy, so I'm chiming in from the outside, is a lot of municipal buildings, multifamily went through the prior Flex Tech program where you were handed this elaborate engineering report but not really given any direction on where to go next, who to contact, how to shop that job, understanding ROI and paybacks. So NYSERDA implemented a new feature, this concierge service, which is an additional that NYSERDA is covering the cost of, to really, for lack of better words, help handhold the project from that initial assessment to actually completing contracting work. So they really found what was the biggest barrier from FlexTech was that people just didn't know where to go next, and they've kind of plugged that hole. So we're optimistic that there will be a lot more movement in this segment of the market, having kind of that additional hand-holding component where things were just dropped off before.
Okay, now we're going to talk briefly about commercial and nonprofit programs. For those, you would start with an energy assessment called Green Jobs, Green New York. This is a very low cost, usually $100, for someone to come and just kind of assess your program, your project, and give you an idea of a plan. And then there's utility rebates that are just rolling out. They're different. These are all hyperlinked here, so you can go to the project page. I don't know if Todd wants to make this available after, or I can just send those program links in the chat after presenting. But yes, all of these then have some pretty good incentives. Again, it depends on several factors we're not going to get into here. Like the NYSEG one, for instance, there's different pathways if you're working on HVAC versus working on refrigeration versus working in an agricultural space. They all depend on your building size, your employee size, things like that. So again, an area where Daniel Morrissey can help guide you through what is the right path for you and just kind of set your course a little bit and provide assistance there. There are some programs for new construction. There's the Buildings of Excellence program, which is a design phase. And then there is the Building Cleaner Communities, which has, if you want to go pretty far and actually have carbon neutral or passive house kind of design. So if you're thinking about a new municipal building and you really want to, be a leader in energy efficiency, these are some good programs that you can utilize. For municipal programs, there's still the Flex Tech Energy Audit, which the parameters here are broken down. I know that CDRCP connects people to this program pretty regularly. I know Germantown did this as with help from CDRCP. And it's a little bit of a complicated document. Ours focused more on HVAC upgrades than on building envelope. But it is available, and here are the incentives. And again, Daniel Morrissey can help you with some of those things. His contact is here. And as I mentioned, we won't go too much into workforce development on this webinar, but we do have a clean energy jobs newsletter. Lillian and Daniel work with job seekers and kind of can connect them to good clean energy jobs. So if you have any people in your municipality that are looking for work, or you have any organizations that work with workforce development, it would be great to be more connected, especially in our rural counties, to just making sure that everyone is aware of all the different resources out there, both us and them on the clean energy side. So this is just a little screenshot of the hub's activities over the last 4 years since we were formed. And so the amount of outreach opportunities that we've had, the people we've engaged with, things like that. We are starting up another 4-year grant, and we would love to hear from anyone and everyone about how to connect better to different communities, and really welcome feedback, and just what will make this information get out to the community better and better. So if you would like to partner with the Hub, a great way to do that is to host an energy literacy workshop. We can come in and explain utility bills. Sometimes we can bring a consumer advocate from the utility. If people are really struggling with their bills, they can put them on a payment plan and things like that. We also talk about like some of the programs we talked about today a little bit more in depth, and how to reduce costs through your own habits. And we provide a little kit with some DIY measures and instructions on how to use those. We also have done a lot of outreach with municipalities on community solar, and we've done educational workshops for clean energy community actions. We worked a lot in Columbia County in particular on heat pump education during the time that action was incentivized. And we also just appreciate direct referrals. Like if you have a community member who's struggling, send them our way and we can try to put them on a path to energy efficiency. And then we would love to know how else you'd like to partner, what the need is in your community, and if we can help in any way, we will. And we are incentivizing participation in a stakeholder survey. So we're hoping that we get a lot of respondents to this survey. It's really like 8 questions. It's probably a 3-minute survey, but we will pick 3 municipalities to partner with when we can provide $1,000 for outreach on kind of energy efficiency, clean energy jobs, whatever you think would be most effective in your community, and kind of co-design how to do that outreach. And that's it for me. This is our contact information here, and we would love to take some questions.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Christina. So we'll open it up to any questions that attendees may have.
I'm going to pose one of the questions going back to comfort homes that just came in. So this question says, comfort home incentives seem like a small amount of money for the insulating scopes of work. Do many homeowners or contractors utilize this program?
So I would agree that it's not a massive portion of the project. So to the orders in the New York State EEBE orders, utility or market rate programs cannot exceed incentives for LMI programs. So there's a little bit of a blockage of how high these incentives could be. I would say that nobody's going to say no to a $2,500 discount on a five or $7,000 project. So it certainly is helpful, but it certainly is not always a market maker, as I think they had initially anticipated that it would be. Um, Again, the utilities are set to roll out new programs in 2027 for the market rate side. We don't necessarily know exactly the numbers that they're going to be offering yet. With that said, they cannot exceed LMI programs. So I don't think it's realistic to assume that they're going to exceed five or $6,000. Um, but unfortunately, it's better than nothing, which was what we had 3 years ago. So any incentive is helpful. I do agree that that gap between 2,500 and 3,000 to say insulate your entire exterior walls is very little to kind of push people to that next step. With that said, you can re-enroll the next year and start over and get full incentives again. So um, not the most robust incentive, but it's certainly better than nothing, which is what we had a few years ago.
And just to break down what Paul said, the orders are Public Service Commission orders that define how public money is spent in this way. The ratepayers pay into a lot of these programs through the utilities, and EEBE stands for Energy Efficiency and Beneficial Electrification or Building Electrification. Yeah.
The survey, is that open to everyone or municipalities only?
I think that particular survey would be for municipalities, but we actually do have a residential survey, and we can send that out after this call, and that also has a gift card incentive. It's a little less. I think it's $100.
Okay, thank you. So this is part of our webinar series. Our next one is in August 5th at the same time and place. A registration link will be going out soon. So we will be covering heat pumps and geothermal energy networks, where we will look at how heat pumps are being utilized, as well as neighborhood scale geothermal systems that provide clean, reliable heating and cooling for buildings. If you are registered for our email notifications, you'll receive a recording of this webinar soon and the invitation for our next one. It can also be found on our website under the News and Events tab. So we do want to thank again Paul and Christina for their time and expertise on this topic, and as well as our attendees for attending, and we hope to see you at the next one. Take care.